Welcome to Ethnic Media Services weekly Friday news briefing, co-hosted today by the Federal Trade Commission, which has partnered with EMS since 2016 to raise awareness of consumer fraud issues through ethnic media briefings across the country. I think we've been to easily over 30 cities over these last 5 years with FTC speakers and representatives, and nothing really underscores their commitment to reaching diverse audiences than their partnership with us and their outreach to ethnic media. I'm Sandy Close, Director of Ethnic Media Services and the moderator for today's briefing. Our topic, as you know, is cars and the red flags to watch out for when buying or financing a car. Our speakers include Daniel Dwyer, attorney with the FTC's Division of Financial Practices, Elizabeth C. Goodell, also known as Beth, supervising attorney for Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid, and Joseph Jamarillo, staff attorney for Housing and Economic Rights, or HERA, in Oakland, California. Our speakers will discuss problems car buyers could encounter, whether they're buying a new car or a used car. Problems that range from misleading ads and deceptive sales pitches to the small print in the contract, from phony online car selling to yo-yo financing schemes. They will also talk about what to do if you feel you could be or have been cheated in the transaction. Cars are among the most expensive things people buy, and problems with car buying and financing rank as the fourth biggest source of complaints the FTC receives about consumer fraud in the country. And I know you'll hear that from Daniel Dwyer. Speakers, please speak slowly as I'm doing, so our interpreters in Spanish, Korean, and Mandarin can capture what you're saying. Reporters, please enter your questions in the chat box, and I would urge our speakers to monitor the questions. Any one question you want to address in the chat box or have data for collateral, please put it in the chat box, as well as responding when we call on the reporter. We are live tweeting today's conference and live streaming it, and we will send a video to all participants this afternoon, along with extended bios of our speakers and highlights in a short press report of the briefing. So now let's begin with our first speaker, Daniel Dwyer, with the FTC's Division of Financial Practices. Mr. Dwyer, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And thanks for having me today. I'm so glad to be joining everyone to talk through issues facing consumers who need to buy or finance a car. So, as you likely know, the Federal Trade Commission's core mission is to protect all consumers from fraud and other unlawful practices. And that emphatically means every community, including African Americans, Asian Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, immigrants, older consumers, lower income communities, and veterans and service members. So today's topic, car buying and car financing, is an incredibly important area for outreach. Cars are key to how many of us live and learn and provide for our families, and they're how we travel to work and school and They help us come together as families and communities. They are also, as you likely know, one of the most expensive and complicated purchases many people will ever make. That complexity leads to issues. As Sandy said, Americans report vehicle-related problems to the FTC quite often. Last year, vehicles were the fourth highest source of non-fraud complaints to the FTC, with nearly 100,000 people reporting these problems. And sometimes vehicle issues harm specific minority communities. The FTC recently challenged discrimination, unfair practices, and deception in several recent cases. So in our Bronx Honda lawsuit from 2020, we alleged that a New York dealership specifically told its salespeople to charge African American and Hispanic consumers more money and interest than non-Hispanic white consumers when they were financing a car purchase. And in our Tate's Auto case from 2018, we alleged that a group of dealerships in Arizona and New Mexico put false income and down payment information in customers' vehicle financing applications. So many of those customers were citizens of the Navajo Nation, and this put them in a bind because they looked like they had lied to their banks, which put them at risk. And then they were approved for vehicle loans they couldn't really afford and risked losing to repossession. So to help people avoid issues like these, I'd like to take us through a quick trip through the car buying process to give you the FTC's main advice, which is based on lawsuits like those and on our investigations. So just to start, as I said at the top, buying or leasing a car is expensive and complicated. So probably our best advice is to think of car buying as a research project that starts well before you set foot on a dealership lot. Dealers will test you once you get there. And just like in school, you'll perform better if you study for the test. You could also think of it like preparing a meal. If you wait until it's dinner time to start planning, you'll have to go with whatever is easiest, like fast food, which could be more expensive and not as good. But if you plan ahead, you get to choose the recipe. So there's a lot here, but I want to try to quickly go through the kinds of things we recommend before consumers even set foot on a dealer's lot. So before you go to a dealership, we recommend that you start by researching what kind of vehicle you need and deciding how much you can afford to pay. It sounds basic, but dealers will often try to sell you a more expensive car or more options than what you need or want. So this work will help you to be prepared if that happens. Then search around to get a sense of prices and options at different dealerships. And then once you find something that you like, call the dealer. We recommend that people ask the dealer to confirm that the vehicle is actually on the lot and to send you the out the door price in writing before you leave your home. That's probably the biggest piece of advice. Get an out the door price for a vehicle before you even go to the dealership. That's the price that includes all charges and fees. It's the price you would pay if you had a stack of cash and you could actually hand it to a dealer. You want to do this because some dealers will advertise a price, but then once you arrive, they'll say the vehicle is unavailable and they'll instead try to sell you a different vehicle, usually at a higher price. Another tip on pricing is to study advertising closely because dealers may advertise prices that aren't available to everyone. For example, and I guess this falls under the category of red flags, an ad might list a low monthly payment amount that goes up after a few months, or say there's no money down, but still require you to pay to drive the car off the lot. or the listed price might require someone to qualify for a discount that's only for recent college graduates or prior customers. So definitely, when you can, read all of the text, even the fine print, and make sure you call ahead, ask the dealer to confirm in writing that your expectations are true. Next, if you plan to finance your purchase, also try to get pre-approved for a loan before you work with the dealer's financing office. So banks, credit unions, and other lenders can offer pre-approvals even if you don't have an account or are not a member, and even if you're shopping for a used car and not a new car. Otherwise, you'll be relying on the dealer to arrange options. And without pre-approval, it's harder to avoid a situation like in our Bronx Honda case, where we alleged the dealer tacked on extra fees and interest for African American and Hispanic buyers. So, and finally, before you go, I know this is a lot, but finally, if you want to finance the purchase, or if you're planning to lease, make sure you check your credit report. You want to look to see if it's accurate, because lenders use it to decide whether to approve you for a loan and how expensive the loan will be. To do that, go to annualcreditreport.com. That's the free site that provides you with the free report from the credit bureaus. So I know it's a lot, so I'm going to summarize. Research.
Dan, could you repeat the credit information? Go to annual credit, what's it, review?
Yeah, annualcreditreport.com. I'm glad you asked.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So research vehicles and how much you can afford, shop around at different dealerships, call the dealer to get an out-the-door price before you even leave home, check your credit report, and try to get pre-approved for a loan. It's a lot to do ahead of time, but that's why we say you should think of car buying as a test or like planning a meal, because the preparation is what sets you up for success. So then, once you get to the dealership, the test begins. And here are several things that may be on the test. I'll give them to you in 3 categories. First, you should know that many things that seem required are actually optional. The one that people probably know is price. You can negotiate this no matter how many times it's printed on a car, you can negotiate it. One big tip here is to make sure you keep the price, the out-the-door price in mind, and don't just focus on the monthly payment. Otherwise, you may end up with a car loan that's a little less expensive each month, but lasts a lot longer and costs a lot more. Also know that the interest rate, if you finance, is likely something you can negotiate. And that's why it pays to get pre-approved ahead of time. And finally, add-on products and services. These are things like service contracts or extended warranties or theft deterrent devices. Many dealers rely on profits from these things in their financing transactions. And so they may make it seem like they're required, but if you don't want these things, tell a dealership no. And then also when you get your paperwork, make sure they don't appear in there. So second big thing on the lot is vehicle history and safety probably won't come up, so you need to know to ask about them. So for all vehicles, new or used, you should ask whether there are any open safety recalls, anything the manufacturer discovered after they sent the vehicles out that needs to be fixed or repaired. Then for used vehicles, you should get a vehicle history report. And you can do that at ftc.gov/used cars, or you can go to vehiclehistory.gov. That report will tell you ownership history, whether the car was in any accidents, its repair records, and whether it was ever declared as salvage, the kinds of things you need to know when buying. And also for used vehicles, have they been inspected? Or if not, can you have someone inspect them, like your mechanic? And are they being sold with a warranty? All of these are things you need to know to ask and actually ask. And then third and finally, in the test on the lot, just don't let anyone rush you through documents. You should never sign something without having read it. So that's what happened in our Tate's Auto case. We alleged the dealership rushed Navajo consumers through the process of reviewing and signing their income verification forms, which kept them from discovering that they had been falsified. So make sure you understand and agree to every single thing you're being charged for, because we've seen things pop up in contracts, even where people tell the dealership, I don't want that. Or we've seen prices change, even when they seem to have been agreed on earlier. And Sandy, if I have just maybe one more minute, the very last thing, so assume that has all gone well and you're ready to drive the car off the lot. To avoid problems here and protect yourself against yo-yo financing, just if you finance a vehicle, make sure you ask the dealer if your financing has been finally approved. And if it has been, make sure that's written into your contract. If not, that means that the terms could change. You could end up paying more in interest. And to avoid problems, make sure you get a written promise from your dealer that, you know, if you gave a trade-in vehicle to the dealership as a part of your transaction, that the dealer won't sell your trade-in before the financing is final. And also get the dealer to agree to return your down payment if the financing isn't approved. And just make sure if the dealer tells you the financing has changed after you leave, the dealer can offer you another deal, but you don't have to accept it. You can take back the car if you don't want the other deal.
That was a superb. I almost would like to hijack you, since I have to make a decision on buying a car in the next 2 weeks. It's such a very detailed checklist for all of us. And I think our next speakers will be repeating several of the things you've said, and that is good, because honestly, it is a lot to absorb. Beth Goodell has a question for you, and let me ask you, Beth, to ask your question.
Thank you. Is there a fee for obtaining vehicle history reports at the websites you mentioned?
There often is, yes. So it's not like your credit report, which, you know, there's a requirement that the credit reporting agencies give you a free report at least once a year. The vehicle history reports are provided by private companies, like Carfax is one that you may have heard, but there's often a lot of others, and they can charge a fee for that report.
I want to take 2 questions and just tell people who ask questions about used cars that I think our subsequent speakers are going to address those. But I won't forget you if those questions aren't addressed. Henrietta Burrows, you have a question for Dan.
Yes, thanks, Sandy. I am wondering if the cheating of ethnic groups that's so outstanding, is it simply a function of racism, or is it one of targeting groups who are considered most vulnerable in terms of the dealerships making a profit?
Yeah, well, I wish I knew what dealers were thinking. The only thing I can actually report on is the results in the cases the FTC has brought, right? And so in a couple of cases I mentioned, in Bronx Honda, we brought a lawsuit and we specifically said, looks like the dealership made clear to its employees, target this group and not another. We don't know exactly why they decided that, but that was their clear intent, as we alleged in the lawsuit. And the same with Tate's Auto. We alleged that those dealerships were located right near a Navajo Nation reservation, and that they had specifically put out advertisements in Navajo publications seeking Navajo consumers. So this was core to their business practice, and they were specifically trying to do business with these customers.
We have time for 2 more questions, but I'm going to read them to save time because I don't want to lose our openings for our next speakers. Moshin Zahir asks, what options does a car buyer have to hold a car dealer accountable other than reporting to the FTC?
Sure. So one thing I would often recommend, often recommend for consumer issues generally, and then definitely with purchasing or financing a car, is to report an issue to the Better Business Bureau. Consumers can also report to their state attorney general. But the Better Business Bureau, they maintain a page for dealerships and other businesses that publicizes consumer complaints, and sometimes they even do their own investigative work. But most importantly, they try to reach out when they receive a complaint to the individual dealership and say, here's what the consumer said. What do you have to say for yourself? And if there's a pattern, sometimes they'll even investigate that and put out their own report. It's the kind of thing we wish we could do, but we don't have the staff for it. So we often recommend contact the Better Business Bureau.
We have some great questions in the chat, but I am, in the interest of time, going to move to our second speaker, and I will keep all those questions in focus and get to them. Elizabeth C. Goodell is supervising attorney for Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. Beth, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I am delighted to be here with you today. I am a lawyer at Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid in Minneapolis. My office is part of a nationwide network of legal aid organizations that are funded by the federal government, as well as state governments and other funders, to provide free legal services for very low income people. So it's a good thing that we are there. It is a sad thing that we are there only for very low income people. And even within that population, we can't serve everyone on every issue that really could use a lawyer. Legal aid organizations do tend to be very committed to serving communities where people speak languages other than English, and to be culturally sensitive and open. So we encourage people who don't speak English as their first language to seek us out when they need legal assistance. My department at my office works on consumer issues. So problems with automobiles fall into my territory. The clients who come to us, being very low income, tend not to have new cars. Our clients come to us with problems regarding used cars. And I do actually want to back up a moment and say, when I refer to very low income people, our legal aid income limits for service tend to be in this, for one person, a household of one person, $16,000 to $25,000 a year in income. And for a family of four, between $33,000 to $53,000 at the top. So again, a low income threshold for our services. And that income range will tend to be the case anywhere in the country for free legal services. We typically take cases when a consumer comes to us having already lost the car to repossession, and they're being sued for the remainder of the debt. Typically, the consumer stopped making the car payments, not because they lost income, but in our experience with the cases we see, because the car stopped working. And it is insanity for a low income household or any household to keep paying for a car soon after it was purchased when it's not working anymore. Continuing to pay for a car that no longer works simply isn't an option. So the car gets repossessed, and then the finance company brings a lawsuit to collect the rest of the debt. We have found success in defending consumers in that situation. We raise whatever defenses the client may have, including perhaps just the fact that the car stopped working so soon after purchase. And I mean within a month, 2 months, less than 6 months, in the cases we've seen. The car loan often has a term up to 5 years. And it has been my belief that a judge would be sympathetic to a situation like that, where the car stopped working so quickly. My experience is that the car finance company doesn't really want to go to court, that the car finance company, again, given my experience with very low income consumers, that the car company will settle the case and walk away. That may not be the case for households with more income, because the finance company may see a hope of eventually collecting. We have also seen cases where the dealer targeted members of a language community. In Minneapolis, there are car dealers who speak Spanish. The salespeople all speak Spanish. The ads are in Spanish. They hold themselves out to the Spanish-speaking community. And one piece of advice I would add to what Dan said, don't trust a dealer because they speak your language. There may be an inclination to think that salespeople who can speak with you in your own language are more trustworthy. Don't make that assumption. A case that we recently had with a Spanish-speaking consumer involved a Spanish language dealer. The client paid $2,000 upfront and financed the rest of the car for $7,000. The loan had a 20% interest rate. The car didn't work properly from the beginning. And when she withheld just one payment because the dealer was dragging its feet on fixing the car, they came right away with their own tow truck to take it back. They didn't follow the proper procedure for a repossession. She came to us. They hadn't sued her for the rest of the money. She just wanted her deposit back. We did bring an action against the dealer and we won. But the dealer has said that it is going to file bankruptcy they've already started a new company, the same people under a new name. So it is difficult, it can be difficult, even when you win, to get the justice that you deserve as a consumer. I want to add a couple of words about advice when buying used cars. It's very similar advice to what Dan mentioned. I think most important is be prepared to walk away when you're being shown cars and prices that you don't want or that's beyond your price ability. I understand for low income households in particular that when your car breaks down or you get a new job that you have to have a car to get to, or you have to drive your children to school, you don't have the kind of time and resources to research the way that households with more resources do. But it is so very important to be able to make more than one trip to a dealer, to the first time you go to the dealer, look at the cars that are available, make a note of the prices and the model and the make, and then go back home and use the free online Kelly Blue Book to check on the reasonable prices for a car of that type, of that age, with that mileage, so that you know what is a reasonable price for that car. And then go back to the dealer and don't offer more than the Blue Book value that you found. Every time I get a new car case, the first thing I do is look up the Blue Book value, and the overcharging on the used cars is astounding. Thousands of dollars in almost every case that the client never should have had to commit to pay, in addition to the very high interest rate. So repeating what Dan said, be prepared to find an objective valuation for the car and negotiate. Be prepared to go to a different dealer if you're not getting a reasonable price. Drive the car before you buy it, in addition to checking the vehicle history information. Take a friend with you. Take someone else to the dealer with you when you're actually going to make the purchase, so that there is another person who hears what the dealer says to you, any promises the dealer makes, any pressure the dealer puts on you. It's important later on, if something really goes wrong, that you have another witness. So for the cases where something does go wrong and the dealer won't take the car back, won't cancel the debt, and you've got an issue where you really need legal assistance. For households that are within the income range for legal aid, look for a legal aid office in your area. There are legal aid programs in every state. So there should be a program that a consumer can turn to. Perhaps we'll get full representation for free, or at least advice on what private lawyers in the area might be able to help. There are private practice consumer lawyers in every state as well. There are national organizations dedicated to making sure that good quality and responsible consumer protection lawyers are available. One of those organizations is the National Association of Consumer Advocates. For someone who is searching online for a lawyer, you can go to the website for the National Association of Consumer Advocates and enter your zip code and the kind of issue you're facing and get a list of lawyers that are members of that organization. It's not a guarantee that the lawyer will be affordable, or available, but it's a starting place to find a lawyer who works on consumer issues, who has a commitment shown, a commitment to quality shown by the membership in that organization. It is also possible to represent yourself. It's very hard, but not impossible. Courts throughout the United States should have a commitment to providing interpreters. I know they do in Minneapolis, Minnesota. You can ask for an interpreter if you have to represent yourself in a court case. Most states have small claims courts that make it easier for people to represent themselves. They tend to have a cap on the amount of money. In Minnesota, it's $15,000. You can bring a case in small claims court as long as the amount of money you're saying the other side owes you is not more than $15,000. If you're being sued, if you are on the other side of a case that has been brought by a car finance company, it is possible, again, hard but not impossible, to represent yourself. It would be better to try to represent yourself than to allow a default judgment entered. Many consumers.
Sorry, Beth, I just wanted to make sure we have a number of questions that you can wrap up so I can make time for your questions.
And my last comment was going to be that most consumer debt cases end up with default judgments, which means the consumer never had a chance to tell their side of the story to the court. So my last piece of advice is, if you get legal papers and you simply cannot find a lawyer or afford a lawyer, at least contact the court, find out how you can represent yourself, get some paperwork, some papers into the court that tell your side of the story.
That's terrific. One quick question that you almost answered, but I want to put it out there again, is from Jyoti Minocha. Do car buying guides help, and which ones are good? So you recommended the Kelly Blue Book. Could you just speak to that? I don't even know how to spell Kelly.
Oh, now that I think about it, I think it's Kelly rather than EY.
Okay.
No, I'm having head shakes. There's an E in it, a second E.
Okay.
Kelly.
Okay. And what does that do? It gives you prices.
Kelly.
See, I'm going to use that when I go to negotiate. All of this is extremely helpful.
It's very helpful for used cars. The Kelly Blue Book collects information on used car sales, and that information is turned into an estimate of a reasonable price for pretty much any make, model, year, and mileage of car.
Okay.
So you would Google Kelly Blue Book, and it is free to look up basic information. You would enter the make, model, and year and mileage of the car, and you will get information on reasonable sales prices for that car.
Great. And one other question we have time for both Daniel and Beth, comes from Peter White. What can you tell us about how informed salespeople are about electric vehicles? Which of you would like to take that on?
So
Dan?
this is Dan. I guess I can start. I'm not, was there a more specific question? Is there a kind of issue that you have a question about? Like, are they informed about how reliable, how long lasting, what their mileage is?
Can you unmute Peter White?
Okay, I just unmuted. This is anecdotal. I have a friend who is, I don't know, he's had 3 or 4 electric vehicles. He's a nut about them. And he said he's never found any salesman yet at the dealership that can answer even the most basic questions. And some of the reasons are ones that you all have mentioned, because they want to steer you this way, or they want to steer you that way, or they say they have so many of these kinds of vehicles available. You get down there, there's no electric vehicles on the lot. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that is, a lot of it's related to the fact that COVID and they didn't get the supplies in and all the rest of it. But there's a lot of misinformation being put out there. And there's lots of other stuff too about, certain states have, you get not a bonus, but a discount or a tax break, if you buy one of these vehicles. Well, for some reason, they're just not available, but something else is, those sorts of things. The same sort of, it's not the technology, it's the salesmanship that's crooked.
Okay. Any comment you want to make on that, Beth or Dan? And then I'll go to Joseph.
Well, just the very basic that like a dealer's advertising needs to keep up with their inventory, right? So it's one thing to have a problem with inventory that many businesses are having because of supply chain issues. But if that's happening, your advertising needs to adjust. And if it isn't adjusting, that's the kind of problem that we're interested in hearing about.
Okay, let's go to our third speaker. Beth, thank you so much for that great presentation. Our third speaker is Joe Giamarillo, staff attorney with Housing and Economic Rights Advocates in Oakland. Joe, I think some of the questions in the chat are from California media specifically, and I know your expertise, especially around issues of repossession, of used car, fraud-related problems, will be very timely.
Thank you, Sandy. Housing and Economic Rights Advocates is a nonprofit organization based in Oakland, California. We provide legal services and advocacy, community education, and technical assistance to other professionals on issues affecting low to moderate income consumers throughout the state of California. We're not legal services corporation funded, so we don't have the restrictions carried with the typical legal aid office, and are able to serve undocumented clients and also engage in class actions and legislative advocacy. We help people with the whole range of debt and credit issues, including student loan debt, mortgage debt, homeowners association debt, credit card debt, issues related to debt collection and in repairing credit, and also help people with auto loan debt issues, which is primarily how we've come into contact with the issues that we're speaking with today, much along the lines of how Beth serves her clients. We will get clients that come into us after their car has been repossessed and sold at auction, but a balance is still owing on the auto loan, and the lender's going after them through debt collection letters or suing them in court. And there are a number of ways to deal with that issue. So I want to talk about that. And I also want to talk about a public education campaign that we are assisting with that has to do with unrepaired cars that are subject to a safety recall, and how consumers can find out more information about that and get the rights and protections available under the law for those kind of issues. But first, just to add a little bit more on the excellent tips that Dan and Beth have given us about what to look for in a car purchase and financing at a dealership. Wanted to let folks know, if they don't know already, that there is a lawsuit the California Attorney General has brought against a major dealer called the Paul Blanco Good Car Company, alleging that they tricked customers into paying thousands of dollars for extra add-on products, such as service contracts, saying that these were required by law when they weren't, or actually concealing the added on charges when customers sign their contracts, as well as engaging in false advertising campaigns on television and radio, promising low interest rates, even for consumers who wouldn't qualify for such rates, just to lure them into the dealership, and then actually providing false income and credit worthiness information to the lenders so that the cars could be financed. Many times when the buyer could not really afford to pay back the loan. So that's a really important lawsuit that we're following here in California. But California itself has some added protections that that may or may not be available in other states. There is actually a buyer's bill of rights here in California that requires that all charges for the car sale be itemized in writing, and that the dealer provide an inspection report for certified used cars, and also that the dealer provide buyers with their credit score and how it's used in the transaction. And for used cars, dealers also need to display a buyer's guide, which tells you the major mechanical and electrical systems on the car, whether the car is being sold as is or with a warranty, and what percentage of the repair costs a dealer will pay if there is a warranty. In California, there's a contract translation law also that requires that the auto sales or financing contract.
Joe, could I ask you to just speak a little more slowly? Our interpreter is having a hard time keeping up with you.
Certainly, and I apologize for that. In California, we also have a contract translation law that requires most consumer contracts, including automobile sales and financing contracts, and the buyer's guide that I just mentioned, to be translated into one of the 5 major second languages in California, if the sale is conducted in that language. And those languages are Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Korean, and Vietnamese. And so this really, beyond California, for every consumer in the country, this really highlights the need to understand in a transaction whether there is a warranty or not for your car and what it covers. Because if the car is sold as is, that means that the dealer is not promising to fix the car. They may try to sell the buyer on a service contract, which may provide an implied warranty, even if the sale is as is. But generally, an as is, you're taking it, as it is, defects and all. You may have recourse for those, but at the outset, the dealer's not making any promises to help you with that. If there's a full warranty, then anyone who owns the car is covered, and the repair under the warranty is free of charge, and there may not be a time limit on that. And then, there's less than full warranties, and there are also implied warranties, which is basically that the car will run and the car will do what the dealer told you it would, like if you're buying, a vehicle to haul a trailer. Dan had spoken about add-ons, and one add-on is a service contract. And in my opinion, those are usually not good deals. They usually duplicate what other warranties will cover if your car is sold with a warranty. And often they require that the dealer be the only repair site. So you're banking on the dealer staying in business and charging you fairly. And oftentimes dealers will charge a more expensive price for repairs than other mechanics. So it's really important, if you're looking into a service contract, to be sure to understand what is covered and what the contract price is compared to the price of likely repairs that might pop up in the future. And depending on your state, there may not be a cooling off period. In other words, a period where you can cancel the contract and bring the car back. In California, there generally isn't, but used car buyers can purchase a 2-day right to cancel if this used car sale is less than $40,000. And one client that I had a couple of years ago kind of highlights a lot of these issues. I had a client in the Stockton area who bought a used truck for $1,000, and the sales negotiations were in Spanish, and she couldn't read English. And the dealer had her sign a number of papers to get the car. Several papers that she didn't understand were actually beyond the sales contract. And she wrote them out a check for $1,000 and took the truck home. And when she got home that night, she showed the papers to a friend of hers who could read English. And she discovered from that friend that the dealer actually had her sign obligations to pay over $2,500 for a service contract and $700 for gap insurance that she didn't know that she'd purchased. So knowing that, she took the truck back the next day and canceled the check. This kind of highlights the importance of what Beth was talking about. Bring a friend, or if you don't speak English, bring someone who can help you understand what you're signing up for. But she did return the truck and cancel the check. But unbeknownst to her, the dealer still tried to deposit the check, and the check bounced. And so the dealer then claimed a debt, but the dealer didn't try to collect on my client. Instead, the dealer assigned the debt to a debt collector who tried to collect, but couldn't reach my client. And then the dealer sued my client for $1,000 for the bounced check, allegedly serving her with the legal papers at her employer's office, which my client never received. So my client never got notice of the lawsuit. Also highlighting an issue that Beth had discussed about many of these lawsuits end up in default judgments, which is what happened here because my client didn't get notice. So she didn't respond at all to the complaint. And so a default judgment was entered against her for the $1,000 plus interest plus attorney's fees. She finally found out about it when they tried to levy her bank account to collect the money. And she came to a debt collection clinic that we held at the Stockton courthouse here in California. And we saw what happened to her. And so we helped her prepare a motion to set aside the judgment because she did not have notice of the lawsuit, and she should be afforded the opportunity to present her defenses, which included many, including the lack of translation of the contract, the misrepresentations about what she was signing up for, and fraud. And we helped her with that motion, and then we helped her negotiate with the debt collector, and were able to get them to dismiss the lawsuit against her. Another avenue that California buyers have is they can also complain to the California Department of Motor Vehicles when there are violations of the California Buyer's Bill of Rights. So I just wanted to highlight that. In terms of financing, just to add on to some of the tips that Dan and Beth had discussed, make sure you understand the financing agreement before you sign it. Every loan agreement has a Truth in Lending Act box that has very specific information about the total sales price with the financing, what the annual percentage rate is, which is the yearly interest rate, what the finance charge is, which is the dollar amount that the credit will cost you, the exact price of the car itself, and how much the monthly payments are, and how many payments will be made. So it's important to check those terms in the contract, because a lot of times I think we as consumers can get lured in by the offer of a low monthly payment. But often those offers also have longer loan periods and higher interest rates, which means overall they're more expensive. We may be paying $10,000, but throughout the life of the loan, our total payments may add up to $25,000 or more, depending on the interest rate. So again, as Dan mentioned, you can get pre-qualified with a lender before you even go to a dealership. You can shop around for your financing. Credit unions, for example, may often offer more favorable terms than a traditional auto lender. And in California, there are dealer markups that are limited to 2 to 2.5% over the lender rate that are intended to protect consumers from the dealers actually marking up the financing too much. Now, There are some refinancing scams out there. Sometimes when auto loan borrowers have trouble making their payments, they can refinance with another lender, but they need to be aware of predatory companies that are offering to get them lower payments. If it's not a new loan with a legitimate lender, it's really not a refinance. And some warning signs of a refinancing scam are when the company tells you to pay them an upfront fee and to stop paying your lender so they can negotiate a lower payment for you. Oftentimes, these companies take your money and run without really helping you at all, or their negotiations are just not successful. And meanwhile, you've fallen behind on your loan and your credit score is dropping and you're risking debt collection. Really, you don't need to pay anyone to negotiate with your lender. You could do this yourself at no cost. Just contact your lender and let them know that you're having trouble with the payments, especially during the pandemic. Many lenders have been amenable to putting a pause on payments, forbearance, or allowing you to modify your loan by pushing any of your missed payments to the end of the loan and then extending the loan for a longer period so that you can actually reduce the monthly payments. And then if you are current on your payments, you can always check with another lender, including credit unions, about getting another loan to pay off your auto loan. When it comes to repossession, I just wanted, everything Beth said is excellent advice, and it describes what we see in California. There's one thing in California, one added protection we have, which is that there are required notices that must go out once a car is repossessed by the lender. And there's a letter that must be sent by certified mail to the last known address of the borrower to give them an opportunity to get their car back before it's sold. And it's called the Notice of Intent to Sell, or the NOI. And there's a time limit to act, which is usually 15 days. So if you get that letter, you should contact an attorney regarding the repossession immediately. One option you have is to reinstate the loan, to bring it current, paying back all late fees and interest. And the NOI, the Notice of Intent to Sell, must tell you when, to whom, and precisely how much you have to pay. You also have the opportunity to pay off the loan completely to redeem it, and the NOI must give you that information as well on how to do that. If the car is sold at auction, as Beth mentioned, the auction price received gets deducted from what you owe, but usually that's a lowball price and it doesn't cover the total amount owed on the car. So then the lender will usually go after the borrower for the remaining balance, called a deficiency, and they'll send a deficiency letter indicating what's owed at the time. Now, this NOI that I keep talking about is very important here in California because it, by law, has to be very specific, giving the exact information about all charges, fees, and interest, how to reinstate or redeem and get back the car, the address that you must send the payment to. There's like 13 different things that must be in that letter.
Joe, I've got to ask you to wrap up because we're almost at the hour.
I will. Okay, and if the letter doesn't comply with all those requirements, it can provide the borrower with an absolute defense to repaying that deficiency amount. And it could also give rise to an affirmative lawsuit against the lender. A really quick plug as I'm wrapping up, I didn't get a chance to talk a lot about, or really talk at all about unrepaired recall cars. But basically, in 3 sentences, it's against the law to rent or sell an unrepaired vehicle that's subject to a safety recall, including tires, lighting, seatbelts, airbags that can present safety related risks of accident. With just your vehicle ID number that you can find on your car, you can enter that in the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration website, www.nhtsa.gov.gov/recalls. And this website will tell you if your vehicle is subject to a recall. And if it is, you should contact your dealer immediately. They are supposed to offer to repair, replace or refund because of that defect. And the manufacturer has to cover the cost of repair for up to 15 years from the issuance of the recall.
Okay.
And the owner should also get a loaner car while the car is being
Hey,
repaired. And so
Joe,
that's my plug for that.
Thank
could you enter that information in the chat? The
Yes.
nhpsa.gov. We are at the end of the hour. This has been an incredibly valuable seminar on problems relating to car buying. And I just want to say, we have our speakers willing to do one-on-one follow-up interviews. The FTC has Spanish speaking subject matter experts, including Rosario Mendez, who's on the call, and Joe Jamarillo is also Spanish fluent. If you want or are interested in doing a follow-up interview, please contact us and we'll coordinate with our speakers. I do have a final question, if people will bear with me for 2 more minutes. It feels as if everything related to cars has one message from you guys, which is buyer beware. Is there something about the selling of cars and financing of cars that makes it feels like we're going into a shark infested area of water where almost without an advocate with us, we're going to be eaten alive. Could you just give us your final thoughts about how to protect ourselves and whether this is unique to cars or whether this is consumer capitalism at its most aggressive? And let's start with Dan. You have just 30, 40 seconds since we're over time.
Sure. Well, so I said car buying is one of the most expensive purchases and most people will make. You know, the other very expensive purchase some people make is buying a home or an apartment or something like that. That buying process takes weeks usually, right? Or even months. And cars are different in that people expect to get them done in a day, but they're often almost as complicated. There's so many ways that dealers can pack additional profit into a deal. There's so many disclosures people need to read and understand. That's why it's so difficult, because the expectation is it happens in a short amount of time, even though it's incredibly complicated.
Great. Beth, any parting words of wisdom about this particular area of consumer? We're also dependent on cars.
Yes, that feature, the car, makes it a more common purchase and an expensive purchase. So I think that's the reason why we hear so many complaints about car purchases, because people need them so badly. But any area of sales produces its own stories of very bad treatment of consumers. And I think the most important thing is to ask for advice, look for people who specialize in protecting consumers and ask for their advice and assistance. There is strength in unity, as in so many.
Great. And your last word, Joe. There's so many things now I wasn't aware of, like as is clause in the contract. I'm almost 80. I bought countless cars. I had no idea. I feel like such a naive car buyer. What is your last word for us?
Yes, I would echo Dan and Beth's comments, and also add, take your time. Don't try to get it done in one day, even though you may desperately need it, and take advantage of the resources that are out there. There are a lot of resources out there. get help in understanding the terms that are being offered and the pluses and minuses. I think one thing we could all try to do is make sure to spread the word that the resources are out there from from the different legal aid organizations, my organization here in California, HERA, to the FTC. The FTC and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau have excellent tips online as well to read, and so just spread the word about the information that we've divulged here today.
Great. Well, look, I want to thank our media for the excellent questions. I hope we'll be able to copy the chat because our speakers have provided excellent responses to some of the questions. And we'll be sending a video which people can use and replay as much as they want. This is a great seminar to offer for people like myself who really need this very important advice when buying or financing a car. So my thanks to FTC for sponsoring today's briefing. My thanks to Beth, Joseph, and Dan for excellent presentations. Thank you, everyone. Today, our conference is now adjourned.